Looks like some folks are filing in, which is exciting.
Welcome, everybody. We'll just start in just about a minute or two. All right, we'll give it just about one more minute as everyone's starting to come in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's a little bit after 6. But hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Enos. I'm Bradley Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering Alumni Relations Manager. I want to thank you all for attending tonight's Women in Engineering Q&A with ECE Alumni. So why this Q&A? Well, March is Women's Month, which presents a great opportunity to give our women in engineering a voice to share their experiences of working in a technical industry and the challenges they face navigating a male-dominated field. And who better to share these experiences and give advice than our very own alumni? So women are often underrepresented in the academic and professional fields of engineering. Over the past few years, 40% of women have left the engineering field. There are many factors leading to this, but we can change this. And unfortunately, according to the Society of Women in Engineers, 1 in 4 females leave the field. Despite the fact that fewer women enroll in engineering programs across the nation, the representation of women in STEM-based careers can increase when college and university administrators work on implementing mentoring programs and work-life policies for women. And here at Virginia Tech, we're taking steps to decrease the gap between women in engineering. One example is Women's Preview Weekend, which provides an opportunity for young women who have been offered admission to the College of Engineering to come to campus, meet current students and faculty, and get a firsthand look at Virginia Tech and the College of Engineering. This year, it'll be the weekend of April 6th and 7th that they will have this event. Another is the Society of Women Engineers at Virginia Tech. SWE creates a network of women engineers throughout Virginia Tech that demonstrates the value of diversity on the campus, which is a great support group. So our panel tonight will share their experiences of working in a technical industry and the challenges they face navigating a male-dominated field of engineering. So I want to thank our panel for coming here tonight. I know you guys are all very busy. I want to first introduce you to Noel Heiks, our graduate from 1997. Noel is an entrepreneur, investor, and engineer. Raised on robots and startups since age 14, Noel has gravitated to high-tech business throughout her career. She has built multiple multi-million-dollar companies, raised money via venture capital and strategic funding, acquired and sold companies with 75 million plus exits, sold patent portfolios, supported 100 million plus line of business in a multi-billion-dollar company, and has driven high growth revenue in commercial and defense industries. In Noel's current role as venture investor, she applies her 25 years of leadership experience advancing technology and building high growth dual use defense and commercial companies. She serves on the board of MCOR Corporation, Census, hopefully I'm saying that right, Technologies,
Yeah.
and Matrix Technologies. So thank you, Noel, for coming here tonight. Noel was also one of our colloquium speakers at the start of the academic year, and students and faculty, they absolutely loved your talk. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate it. Really excited to be here today and representing women in engineering, which I've been very excited to do for a few decades now. So really excited about this opportunity to talk with some of our alumni and others as well.
Thank you. Next, we have our very own Christina DiMarino. She is assistant professor here in Arlington, and she's also part of Center for Power Electronics. Christina received her master's and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from Virginia Tech in 2014 and 2018. She was a Weber Fellow from 2012, to 2015, and a Rolls-Royce Graduate Fellow from 2016 to 2017. Christina has helped manage 2 CPAS laboratories here, which are really cool facilities in our building. From 2015 to 2018, she was the student membership chair for the IEEE Power Electronics Society. She is currently a member at large for the IEEE Pell's Administrative Committee, chair of the Pell's Technical Committee 2 on Power Components, Integration, and Power ICs, and associate editor for the IEEE Transaction on Power Electronics, and is a member of the IEEE Pell's Women in Engineering Committee. Very busy. She is also on the advisory board for PCIM Europe and the advisory of the IEEE Pell Student Branch Chapter at Virginia Tech, and is the member of our own Diversity and Inclusion Committee here in our department at Virginia Tech. So thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Next is Megan Bennett. She's our 2020 graduate in electrical engineering. Megan is an electronic design engineer at Blue Origin, a company driven to better Earth through space, and a director at the Space Frontier Foundation, a political advocacy nonprofit. Megan is working on the Lunar Crew lander for NASA's sister of the Apollo's mission, Artemis. Hopefully I'm saying that one correct too. Which will send the first woman and person of color to the moon. Very cool, Megan. She grew up in Blacksburg and is a proud alumni of Virginia Tech's electronic engineering program. So thank you, Megan.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm elated to get into these questions.
And Megan will be our colloquium speaker in a few weeks here in Arlington. So we're looking forward to that. So we had questions from our attendees submit prior to the talk. So we're ready here to go ahead and get started. We only have an hour, and I know it's going to go by really quick. So let's go ahead and start with Noel. First question, what advice would you give to aspiring women engineers who are just starting their careers?
So I really talked about this actually at my colloquium talk, was that you get very excited as an engineer and want to really dive into the technical weeds. I mean, all of us, we went into this for a particular reason, which you're actually going to ask a question about later. But there's another element to your career and to your life path that you cannot ignore, and that is learning to sell, which everyone hates. So it's very, very important for you to be able to pitch your ideas in order to formulate your hypothesis and then create your proposal and then submit that proposal. Every element of that requires a bit of salesmanship. And usually that is kind of something an engineer wants to throw up about. But I think that is something that is extremely difficult, but it's a very, very important element to carry with you, especially as you're just starting out your career. And if you can do it before you even start out your career, more the better. I also believe that applied engineering, so working together with any kind of commercial company, doing some interning is really important before or just about as you're going to start your career. You know, these two wonderful women, Christina and Megan, you know, obviously know that as well, working with, you know, Christina's working with some really amazing companies I know at the Power Lab. I got to see her Power Lab. It's amazing. And also I know Megan, I know Blue Origin very well because I live on the Space Coast. And now I wanted to ask you a bunch of questions. But if you think about that, there are commercial companies that have these problems. So intern and work hard. So I would say, you know, those are the two things that I think are really important: understanding customers and selling, and then also working hard and interning and applied engineering.
Awesome. You know, that actually goes to one of the questions submitted for Christina. What were some impactful moments from being an intern at the companies that you interned at?
Yeah, so I interned when I was a graduate student, and so for me, and I did it kind of the summer after my first academic year was my first internship, and that was profoundly helpful. And I interned at a variety of different companies, two in the US, very different. One like system integrator, General Electric, huge company. Another one, a smaller company, still kind of not quite in its startup phase anymore, but still considered a small business at the time. And then the other was abroad, was in Japan, another huge company. And so just getting to see how those different organizations kind of work differently, getting to understand organizational structures in the institutions, the business models, the approach to research and how that connects to their business side. Because I was on the research side, right? So I was working more on the research teams, but understanding how they kind of tie that into the products that they're going to be eventually developing and all of that stuff, and understanding kind of what Noel's talking about, right? About the still, even though we're on the research side, you have to be selling your idea to somebody. Somebody's funding your research. Somebody's funding you to do what you're doing. And so you can't just do it because it's fun, as much as we want to do that. And so understanding how all that dynamic within these different structured organizations worked for me was really valuable. Obviously, seeing their labs and all their cool equipment and stuff was also a lot of fun and really impactful. But for me, it was really understanding how these huge organizations work and how they are able to still innovate and at the same time, you know, make these products and have these kind of longer term investments as well as those nearer term investments. For me, that was a really valuable lesson.
Okay, great. Now going to Megan, now we can go back to talk about your volunteer at the Virginia Tech Trek Lab. How did that translate to your career?
That's a good question. I think that going off of what Noel and Christina both have mentioned, there is a lot to be said about selling yourself, especially early on. So I actually started volunteering in the Trek Lab when I was 17. So growing up in the area, I was in robotics and convinced my high school teacher to get me in front of as many interesting people as possible. And boy, do the people I worked with in that lab still take the cake. Most of them have gone on and are VPs of companies doing things that I will seldom accomplish for lifetimes. So I would say that getting in a mentor-mentee mentality and always having someone to look up to and someone to mentor has been really critical. And I definitely think that being in the Trek Lab, especially from such an early age, I'm not saying you have to be 17 to get the same experience, but putting myself in a position where I was acknowledging that I was the person in the room with the most obvious room for growth enabled me to absorb a lot really quickly. And I still take a lot of those just casual conversations. I watched a lot of defenses. I watched a lot of dissertations. And every time someone had to practice a pitch or practice an idea, like I was in that room taking notes. So I think that there is a lot to be said about putting yourself in a position where just by being in that room, you have the ability to absorb so much from the people around you. And so I didn't spend every day building wire harnesses, which is a lot of what I do now, even on Blue Origin's Lunar team. but the conversations going on around me taught me more than anything that I could have learned from sitting in a room by myself and just beating a circuit until it worked.
For the experience and the people around you.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you. Noel, I'm going to go back to you. So looking ahead, what do you see as the future of engineering, particularly for women, and what opportunities or challenges do you anticipate?
So, so this kind of gives me an area where I see this. I have a daughter who went into STEM, and also she didn't go into engineering, sadly, but and she's actually at Virginia Tech, which I'm very excited about. But I believe that there are endless opportunities for women and other underserved segments of our population. I think that the advent of remote work and also AI offers significant opportunities that anyone can leverage from any part of the world. However, I think that there is a big hurdle in exposure. I think that if a girl who's in a K-12 through 12, education system, or, she's in a remote area, if she's not exposed to that kind of environment or not exposed to engineering, I think that they're at a significant disadvantage. I personally, I'm not in the social aspect of this as much. I wish I were, but of course, in my community and everything that I've ever been interacting with my daughter and both my kids, actually being involved in FIRST Robotics, being involved in those kinds of opportunities, I think are very, very important. However, it kind of hurts my heart to think there are probably vast parts of our population that are not getting exposure into the sciences in general, and also engineering. So I think there's that the education system and other parents bear the burden of overcoming that challenge. And I think that it's a big one, and it's one of those creative things that we all need to get together to figure out how to solve.
Yeah. Christina or Megan, do you have a comment for that? On that question?
I mean, being in the nonprofit sector alone will tell you so much about the gaps and exposure we have. And I was actually looking at a study the other day where, especially like women in STEM, they lose interest at like middle school. Like, it is such a steep curve that we are trying to combat. And even myself, like, I didn't get into FIRST Robotics actually in high school, and I still volunteer with them actively. Like, I judge competitions locally to me in Seattle. And there's such a distinct moment that you can see where someone goes, okay, I can do this, I'm good at this. And then that last bit of guidance is usually all it takes to get someone from I'm good at this, I like this, to doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, a combination of things. So there's definitely the exposure side. I think that's a huge issue. And at Virginia Tech, we've got a lot of great programs that are really trying to reach out to students from middle school and high school, and even in their college years and things, and really trying to get women and underrepresented individuals, exposed to STEM and give them really fantastic opportunities to work in the labs and all of these things. And so I think that's a huge piece of it, but then it's also really creating an environment that helps them, feel welcomed, for lack of a better word. So, when I first joined my lab, and I love my lab, but I was one of very few women in it. Out of like 60 students, there were like 3 of us or something ridiculous, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be outright comments to make you feel unwelcomed. It can just be you don't see yourself represented there, and minor things here and there that over time kind of make you feel like this, I don't know if this is right for me. And so you mentioned, Kathleen, like the retention issue. So that is meant, as well as, Noel mentioned, or I believe like the policies and things, or maybe that was Kathleen. I'm sorry for forgetting. It's all blending together a bit. But, all these things that start to be kind of these minor barriers, and some people really face major barriers as well, that just kind of add up over time. So one is getting, people interested in that kind of pipeline. And also I've heard this like highway type analogy as well. It's not just a pipeline, one in, one out. It's also like a highway with lots of on-ramps, right? So how at multiple stages of their career can we allow women to come into this field is kind of one aspect. But then also, how do we make it easy for them to stay in the field and make
Right.
it so that they want to stay in the field and want to continue, right? I think
Well,
that's another major challenge as well.
Yes.
But also a lot of opportunities, right?
Yes.
We can improve.
Yes, definitely. Is there, for anyone on the panel, is there a particular challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome it, and how did it impact you?
I would say for me, it was failure, multiple failures. I mean, when you say the path to success, people think it looks like this and it's really just this crazy squiggly line.
Yeah.
I went through lots of those squiggles, right? And there were several times when I think I could have just thrown up my hands and gone and done something completely different in finance or whatever, because I almost lost my company. I almost lost my company back in the telecom boom and bust. I almost lost my company again in the financial crisis of 2008. There are many startups that I work with that are on the precipice of total success or total failure. And I think that a lot of women have, not only the imposter syndrome, but they also have a lack of confidence. And so when something horrific happens, like, you're not able to make payroll next week, I think probably, some women, maybe some of us would want to, but I think men too, but I think just in general, there's a lack of confidence would cause us to throw up our hands. So I think that what I learned from multiple failures is that multiple failures are what build a resilient business, what build resilient people. And that's something that I think, that really taught me something. And I think just as a person and as a woman, built that confidence. So
Be stronger.
yeah, I think people do have to learn that.
So,
I do think that's a really important lesson. It took me a while to realize that it's okay to fail. And actually you learn so much from failure. Failure is not a bad thing. Like we're kind of, in some cases, raised to believe. Like some of us just feel like you need to do everything perfectly. And if you fail, you did something horribly, horribly wrong. It's like, no, that's a learning opportunity, especially in like the research field and going into engineering in general, where you're, encountering these major problems. You're going to fail. It's really how you learn from those failures and how you adapt and grow that really is the true kind of success or kind of measurement rather than the initial failure.
how you keep going and trying again and
Yeah.
again. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I think, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I think for me, one of the biggest challenges that I've met in my career in the nonprofit, also in the industry sector, is being able to find these opportunities can be so hard in a lot of cases. Like there are many instances where you think, once again, it's this linear path of growth where you're like, okay, once I, hit goal A, goal B will reveal itself magically. But that's not always the case. Like sometimes you have to be persistent, you have to do some digging. And in my case, like it took several years for me to get into a position that I am fully confident in. But it was not for a lack of trying. I can definitely tell you that much. So many instances, there are opportunities that present themselves that may not be right for you. And there's a lot of opportunities that you have to go find, like through the mud, have to go find. So yeah, I think that one of the biggest challenges I've overtaken is trying to figure out like what the room looks like that I'm trying to get into and then getting to it somehow, even if it's pitch black and I don't have the right equipment.
So for anyone on the panel, how do you approach mentoring and supporting other women in engineering?
Well, I approach it like I approached working with my daughter. I mean, and also, I mentor not just women, but lots of people because they're CEOs of companies that I've invested in, and they're all in different stages of maturity. Some of these CEOs are, well into their 40s. Some of them are just out of undergrad, which is pretty crazy. So, each one of them I approach in a coaching kind of parental family role. So even though I'm an investor, I'm not jumping in and, pointing my finger at them. It's more of, hey, here I am, your coach. You've got these skills to work on. Let's do your drills, and, I think I approach, women in those roles maybe with a little bit more of a motherly tone, I would say, for myself. And I'm able to do that because I'm a female in this male dominated industry. And
Mhm.
like Christina said, I look like a woman to them too. So obviously I'm somebody who kind of did these things, so I can offer this, supposed wisdom, although, whatever it's worth. But,
Mhm.
but I approach it more like a coach or a parent, rather than a boss or a dictator sort of thing. I think that that's helpful. And it also expresses the softer side, I think, of negotiations and selling and communications, which I think women can generally do a little bit better. So.
Great. Christina or Megan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll go and take that one.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
my
really
goodness.
nailing these timings tonight, I promise. Usually on top of these things, but I was just gonna say, like, very briefly, like, I've found that even in positions where you don't think you have a platform, that you have teachable moments, like, by teaching, we learn, and also there's always gonna be something that you are some flavor of an expert in the room in, whether it's your personal background, whether it's your technical background, there is always going to be something you can offer and gain from someone around you. So I've at least found in my mentor-mentee relationships that as much as it is about imparting knowledge, it's also about being receptive to those lessons that are on the other side of the table.
Great.
Yeah, I would say completely agree with what was said. And also part of mentoring is really trying to understand like the each other, right? The mentor and the mentee, and what are the goals, objectives kind of for that mentee in particular. And also realizing that there's, the mentor is learning from the mentee as well. It's not just a one-sided kind of arrangement, at least in my experience. So yeah, I think it can be like a mutually beneficial relationship. I think, a lot of the mentorship kind of opportunities I've had kind of happen organically. It's not like I approach someone, I'm like, can you be my mentor? Or, do you want to be my mentee? It's kind of just like through interactions, it kind of just evolves. And then before we realize it, we're like, oh, we're kind of like in this mentorship type relationship. And that's really cool. So yeah.
Organic.
Yeah, I think those tend to be the most natural. There are definitely ones where it's like I have graduate students, and so it's like, all right, I'm your advisor, you're my graduate students. That's also like a mentee mentor relationship. So yeah, I think they're probably, everyone on this webinar, right? If you really take time to think about it, you'll probably identify without probably realizing you were in those relationships. You'll be like, oh wait, this person's been kind of serving as my mentor, and oh wait, this person's kind of been like my mentee. And kind of, I think when you actually like acknowledge that, I think that can just add further benefit. And when you realize, okay, I have been kind of serving in this role, how can I kind of better help that person now that I've really acknowledged it, or vice versa. And also something I've learned about in recent years that I didn't really know about was, it's not just mentorship that's important for really advancement, also sponsorship and advocacy is really important. So like when you do kind of work your way up that career ladder, right? Kind of looking at the people that you can kind of bring with you and really highlight and say, this person would be great for this promotion or this opportunity, a high visibility opportunity. Like if you recognize someone's been really putting in the effort and has kind of been overlooked, or maybe people haven't noticed, right? Use your voice for that to really help lift up those people.
Oh, I like that. So how does communication skills impact your ability to work successfully in engineering? This with mentoring and going up the ladder and.
Yeah, I think that, what I was talking about earlier, the salesmanship of it, and this is something that I said this also in the colloquium too. I think that during a lot of our applications for grad school, I remember reading people's essays for them and giving them coaching advice, on or grammar or whatever. But recognizing how many engineers just gloss over the whole communications aspect of their career or what they want to do, it is just so not relevant. You know, it's, my math, my Fourier transforms, everything I'm doing here is it's just so much more. And that's what people are going to care about. but actually it is much, it is maybe sometimes unfortunately, because it seems to us like it's, snake oil charming, sort of thing, rather than, the facts and the actual data that should tell you everything you need to know about this particular product or anything. But the way that you communicate the results, or the way that you communicate your proposal to go and do a research project or to develop a product, you have to have market, you have to have competition, you have to understand the funding availability, you have to be able to communicate everything that's good and bad, and hopefully a lot more good about what you're proposing. And so again, back to that salesmanship, I think being able to communicate your ideas and your conviction about things that you want to do, either starting a company or being part of another company or doing a research project, that is so much, it's so much more important, really. Once everybody can have great ideas, really. And, I know that not everyone is an amazing engineer that can be working at Virginia Tech. However, there's yet another big hurdle, and that is that communication capability. So I think communication can sometimes be a lot more important, and it's not usually stressed as much. I mean, look at our curriculum when we were engineers. How much communication do we have to do? I mean, really, and I'm looking at what my daughter's doing right now. She, it's very much like stay in your lane. Whereas it probably would be helpful to have a little bit more of the communication side. So, anyhow, I would say it's pretty important.
All right. Well,
Just
talk about
add to that.
oh, go
Sorry.
ahead, Christina.
I
No, go
think
ahead,
I
please.
completely agree. This was hugely important. I was very fortunate. My undergraduate institution was different from Virginia Tech, but I was very fortunate that from year one, we had this repeating design course that was every semester, all 4 years, where we had to give multiple presentations, had to write multiple technical reports, had to we had a customer, we had to listen to the customer, we had to digest that and say, okay, what does the customer think they want? What do they really need? Right. And understand that. And we had to pitch this repeatedly. And, so many students were complaining constantly. I was so shy. I hated presenting. Now I'm they made us do it so many times. And really, when coming into grad school, I really further saw how valuable that was. And got some really great opportunities, not because I'm technically the best, but because I could communicate what we were working on, frame it well, understand my audience. I think that really goes so far. And I think as engineers, we underestimate the importance of communication. And in our center at Virginia Tech, we really stress presentation skills, and not just, making cool, flashy PowerPoints. We're talking about what is the story you're trying to tell? Who's your audience? What's the problem? What's the impact of this? All that. And then, yes, the technical results are great too, right? But really framing it. And I think that's, important.
Yeah, I think in grad school, we do a much better, because I went to undergrad and grad school for Virginia Tech, and it was just night and day. I think introducing that into undergrad education would be really helpful. That way, you're not going into your first job without that under your belt.
Yeah. And I'll say too, even as a former undergrad student, even if you don't realize it at the time, fundamentally, engineering is communication. You're trying to define the problem and go solve it. Even if you don't realize it, your professor is trying to communicate to you through your test. Is it about the equations? Yes. Is it more importantly about what is trying to be communicated at any given time, included when you're in exam room, included when you're lecture, included when you're in those between assignments? Fundamentally, engineering is communication. You cannot convince me otherwise. And I think that so many times it's labeled as a soft skill or a passive, not even requirement. In so many cases, oh, communication preferred. That'd be nice, but that is absolutely not the case. And I'll give a quick example where the first time I experienced the power of communication is how I got into the space nonprofit sector, where I was actually lobbying with different Congress members. So I was on Capitol Hill. I had maybe a dozen meetings with different congressional members. And I was, nervous at the time going into a room and being like, hey, can we have $400 million for NASA? That'd be really awesome. And just having asks that way outgrew what I was comfortable with, like having about $40 to my name at the time. And so I think that there's such a value in communicating, once again, whether it's through like written, verbal, or presentation style methods, or just in general, like communicating with your environment, reading body language, as hard as it may seem for some, especially in engineering, and then seeking out those opportunities that actively make you uncomfortable in order to grow and to better those communication skills. Because yeah, I found myself, especially once again in Capitol Hill, like sitting across from these staffers that some had PhDs in physics, some got degrees in journalism. Like you never knew who would be sitting across the table with you, but you had the same pitch every time to try to be as effective as possible. And you can gain a lot from seeing who's around you, trying to do your best, like even if it's just an individual assignment, like what is trying to be communicated at a given time, and how can you communicate back as effectively as possible.
So like Christina said, know your audience.
Yes, absolutely.
Got a different audience every time, or a very different audience. So communication is a valuable skill that you learned at Tech, but what other skill has really helped you in your career, or what you learned at Tech, or maybe at your first job?
I would say technical thoroughness, to jump back in this again. Something that I really benefited a lot, whether it's at Virginia Tech or just in general, like being as thorough as possible is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. And that's like documentation that you can give your future self notes, whether that's actual note taking or just in general, like being as thorough as possible and being as curious as possible. Like Google every word you don't know. Like do not leave a document until you fully understand it. And I think for me, at least personally, the difference I saw, whether it was in school or in my career, between doing things to get them done and doing them to fully and completely understand them, vastly different experiences.
Yeah.
Kind of along those lines is like, just question everything, right? Just because it's written in a journal paper doesn't mean it's 100% correct, or that it's the best approach, or that's it, right? Question everything, really, ask the questions, and understanding what are the questions you should be asking and when is really, for me, it was a really valuable skill to learn. I would go into my advisor's office and be like, this, and this paper had this, and he would start asking questions like, oh, I didn't think about any of these. And now it's like a reflex that everything you read, really questioning, how did they really come to this conclusion? Well, what approach did they take for that? And really, like Megan was saying, really the details of it. And really getting to the bottom of things and realizing that, there are holes in everything, and and that's okay. Just understanding them and understanding. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
No, I think that's the after effect of rigor, right? This engineering is not easy. It really isn't. And anybody who says it's super easy is just, something's wrong with them. But you also have to think that discipline requires a great amount of rigor and responsibility. That's what you're talking about, Christina, right? You need to question everything. I do due diligence on companies, and I get pitched probably about 10 times a day on things where people will just throw fancy words in, like hyperspectral, or and thinking that what they're going to do is pull the wool over some dumb financial investor's eyes. But luckily, I have this amazing background I got at Virginia Tech, which is question everything. And just because you say hyperspectral doesn't mean that what you have to sell to me is that all that fancy, right? So I think that that rigor is very important. One of the other skills I think that also happens at Virginia Tech, especially in the labs, this is, I love hardware and I love applied engineering. And I said that earlier, I'd say it again. So anything with applied projects, your senior project and undergrad, all the grad school projects. When I was a research assistant at Virginia Tech. So even though many years beforehand, when I was around 14, I started programming. I started programming robotics because my dad luckily owned an automation business that I got to work in. but I kind of grew up learning that, here is this problem that a big company has that I'm working on, and I'm a teenager at my dad's robotics company. I better get this right. To the same sort of thing in my senior project in optics, I better get this right. And I had to program a bunch of things. So then I went on to grad school, and we were doing contracts with Alcoa Fujikura or Boeing or Raytheon. And each one of those projects, you're actually going in and making a sensor to solve a problem for a bridge that's about to fall down, or a corroding airplane wing, or some other sort of thing that the company needs. So I think those applied projects again and again and again, like you said, Christina, like presenting over and over and over again, it gets you sort of like in the groove. The same sort of thing with projects. You're constantly doing projects for these companies, either in some sort of applied lab situation. And I think those skills at Virginia Tech were really, really strong. Every lab I ever took was amazing.
So one thing about is balancing. So at Virginia Tech, for being an engineer student, you're super busy, you're in your studies, your research. How did you balance having, like a life on campus, having activities, doing different activities to being an engineer student?
I'm not going to take that. You know, it was funny. I thought of this question. I saw this question, and I thought, oh, boy, it's really sad, because I was in a chess club when I was an undergrad, and that's pretty much what I did. So,
This is fun.
but I was so terrified. I was so terrified because I didn't have any confidence when I was an undergrad. And oh, by the way, I was a physics major, so you can't really count that.
Okay.
When I went into electrical engineering in grad school, I understood then how to manage my time, because I had worked, I had done applied work and all that sort of thing. So I went into grad school, and I was able to balance and do other activities. So I went from chess club to lead singer in a rock band when I was in grad school. So
The confidence went up.
I was able to balance that, but
That's awesome.
But I really think that it's hard. My daughter right now is struggling with time management as an undergrad, but I think that it's an evolution of learning how to adult, and that really happens during your formative years in your undergrad, and you either make it or you don't. And that's what I told my daughter. So in engineering, it's even worse because it's harder.
Right.
Yeah, I would say mine's not a great example, because I was at Virginia Tech for grad school, so we don't really have a life. If anyone's ever seen PhD comics, it is funny because it's true. But I would say that I did utilize I don't know if this counts, but I did kind of find my passion of service kind of through my work at Virginia Tech. So I started volunteering a lot for IEEE and really loved it. So I was working for within the Power Electronics Society within IEEE. I was working a lot with the student chapters and young professionals groups, and kind of trying to put on networking events at major conferences. Through that, also started working with women in engineering there. So it's not quite like solely fun stuff, but I was really passionate about it. And that was kind of the thing that for me was really fun to do on the side, in addition to working on my PhD. And of course the traveling. So getting to go to conferences and present my work and all of that stuff, and getting to travel around the world was also a great opportunity at Virginia Tech during my grad student years. So that was also fun.
Great.
Yeah, and I think I'm notoriously bad for overfilling my plate, which is probably not a surprise to anyone who knows me. And I would say that my freshman year was really easy to balance. I found myself walking a lot more than I did in high school, because Virginia Tech is a huge campus. And so I found a lot of my balance to be in those passing moments where I would go from class to homework to whitewater, which is what I was super into. I did a lot of kayaking and rafting, and became a raft guide at one point throughout the Southeast United States. But then, to be completely transparent, I lost a lot of that balance, between my middle 2 years of undergrad. I found myself experiencing life for the first time, and it was really, really hard. I was pretty depressed, and there were a lot of instances where not only was it a struggle to like rekindle that joy that I found in a lot of the math problems I had, like for the 18 years prior, which was a no-brainer, but I feel like there's so many instances where the prioritization and the requirement for life balance came from challenging like what is important in life, like what really is what will make this little trip on earth worthwhile. And that is not something that is always answered in class. Like it really isn't. Like I found myself in a lot of positions where like I volunteered a lot with the electrical and computer engineering program, like the ambassador team. I love every single advisor in that office right now. Like I found myself in a position where I was volunteering to, once again, like when people ask you questions point blank, like, why are you doing this? And you have to come up with an answer, chances are you're gonna carry that with you until the next conversation. And so I found myself in a role where like did really well, excelled in the work-life balance, fell off of it, and had to re-find it. And then once I did, I valued it so much that I have not looked back since. Like Blue Origin, to give a little bit of a shout out, is one of the best companies I've ever experienced in my life for work-life balance. Like I had a couple pending job offers from SpaceX, and I had one from Blue. I got on one conversation with my now manager. No brainer from that point on. and let me tell you, I got a lot of phone calls that were not happy from the company that is not to be named, run by someone whose name rhymes with Tusk. But yeah, it's one of those things where like once you decide that that is a priority in your life, hold on to it and keep it. Like you will not regret it, in my opinion.
That's great advice. The experience taught you a lot, so you can go on. It's wonderful. But so we have a guest that just submitted a question for you, Megan, that goes along with your answer. What was your biggest takeaway from your undergraduate years?
Good question. Yeah. Noting that's my only collegiate experience, happy to answer. I think for me, once again, it is that prioritization. I found myself in a lot of really unique circumstances because I zoomed out a little bit and was able to do some really cool things. Once again, I've gotten to talk to a lot of congressional members. I did a lot of design teams in undergrad, and also through the research in the mechatronics lab, Dr. Leonessa brought me into a room. He's like, hey, I know you like whitewater. How do you feel about going to the other side of the world? Heard you never left the country. And I was like, sounds good to me. And so I think in my personal experience, doing your homework, that's number one. I benefited a lot from doing my homework. Do that. That's really important. And then looking around you and being like, okay, what habits do I want to build? Like I gained so much from my peers. Like the fact that two of my best friends from undergrad are in competing quantum computing courses, one at Yale, one at MIT, and I'm just like, man, my friends are my heroes. Like that's crazy. And I would not have met them if I hadn't like looked up around and like really gotten to know a little bit more of the people in my classroom as well as just in general. So talk to your professors. I got a lot out of that. I know I'm extremely extroverted. I'm an edge case in a lot of instances, but yeah, I just got so much from like the love of learning and learning how to learn and getting myself in these opportunities and like saying yes a lot. Like you don't have to, like it's hard to know yourself into an opportunity, but it's really easy to say yes enough that someone will champion your path in your existence and just give you that opportunity to prove to yourself and to others that like you do stuff.
That's great. Question for you all. What is your favorite Hokie memory? Kind of changing gears here.
What is a Hokie memory truly? Like
there's so many.
What do you want, Kathleen?
I mean, the problem is there's so many. There's caving, there's climbing on Fool's Face, there's tubing down the river, there's studying and pulling your hair out in the library. Yeah. There's going to, I mean, I loved the live music in downtown Blacksburg. I just loved it so much so that I ended up becoming a lead singer in a band. You know?
Have you performed in Blacksburg?
I did. I played at Top of the Stairs and what used to be called Pedro's that is now called the Milk Parlor, which is there.
Wow.
And actually went with, you know what my favorite hokey memory is going with my daughter to emo night at the milk parlor and remembering playing on that stage.
That is amazing.
So I remember that, but there's a host of actually academic memories that were a lot of fun,
Mhm.
like like my thesis and presenting and all those sorts of things, and working in the Fiber and Electro-Optic Research Center. I spent many years of my life, working there. So just I have very fond memories of Blacksburg, and love going back there to see my daughter too.
No, that's great that she's there.
Oh, it's awesome.
But in your memories, it show like a good work-life balance right there.
Hey, I snuck
Yeah.
it in. I snuck it in.
That's great.
But like Megan said, I kind of went through I was not doing much, and then I did it later on.
Yeah.
I learned that I wasn't going to fail out if I did some fun things. So
Yeah.
Yep.
That's good. Christina or Megan, did you have a favorite hokey memory? Or
Similar, all the outdoor activities I just loved,
Yeah.
all like the hikes and things, and some of our people in our center would organize ones as a group, so that was great getting to see everybody in like our center outside of the lab, which almost never happened, so that was really fun. Just having those kind of like group events outside in nature and being relaxed and not under pressure, and so yeah, those were all fun times, definitely.
Oh, good.
Yeah, what wasn't a good time, truly?
Yeah.
Kidding a little bit. I will say something a little bit more palatable and probably a lot of people can relate to is like the sigh of relief that comes from the end of the academic cycle. And
Yeah.
just having those moments, like I can remember like every year there was a time where like I was with my roommates and just like, "Whoo, you guys want to watch something on TV? Like that'd be great." And I think that there is like, and you can feel it on campus. Like I know that you guys are probably in the middle of it now, Kathleen, with like midterms or getting ready for finals and graduation. Ooh,
Yeah.
where like
Yeah.
everyone feels this like sigh, and Blacksburg gets calm, and like it starts to become this little bit of a ghost town. Like I can attest to that since I've spent a lot of time in Blacksburg, especially where there's this like sigh and like everything's quiet. And there's a difference between the eye of the storm quiet, which is before the semester starts, but right after, it's like everybody's hands on the table. You accept what has happened and you get to breathe for a second and then just recalibrate. And I think that's one of the best experiences like I've had. And it's something that, in my opinion, the academic environment especially caters to really well. Like there are not a lot of like, especially like career things. Like I work all the time. I get, 3 weeks off as of now in my career, but I don't look for like, oh, in 8 weeks, I am guaranteed to breathe, regardless of how hard this moment is now. It just doesn't happen, which is a benefit. Spoiler for those of you who might be considering industry. But yeah, I think that that sigh of relief that 35,000 people share feels pretty good.
Getting re-energized after that too.
And just to kind of add to that, so something I tell my students now, because I learned this trick a little too late, but after that sigh of relief, also taking the time to reflect on like all the amazing growth you had in that past semester, the past academic year, because I feel like we just keep like looking forward and we don't really stop and appreciate like I knew none of this when I started this academic year, and now I've learned about all this, right? And yeah, I've failed and stumbled, but I've learned through that as well. So I've grown as a person. I understand more like technically. I've also grown in other ways, and just taking the time to like reflect on that and really appreciate, yes, you struggled, but it wasn't for nothing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, good. Wow, it's almost 7. So I want to ask 2 more questions from our guests tonight. For anyone on the panel, if you are not an engineer, where would you be?
On a boat, looking for orcas. That's easy. I might do this sabbatical, honestly, but I'd be in the middle of nowhere.
That's great. Noel will be a singer.
I'd be singing with Taylor Swift or something, I'm sure.
Christina,
I genuinely
I don't
don't
know.
know. Traveling, anything I could do all traveling, or I would love to learn to speak multiple languages or something. I don't know. Something artistic. Yeah. Most of my family are artists and I just didn't get that gene. So I would love to try and tap into that if I could. Yeah.
Oh, it's
Spoiler
great.
alert for those like tuning in or watching this later. I don't know, like these interests are called hobbies if you do it right.
Oh,
Like,
well, since we only have a few minutes left, what advice, what would be, I don't want to say the final advice, but what would be the big advice that you would give to women that are thinking about going into engineering or thinking about stepping away?
There's so many opportunities out there. All the advice I would say, learn to sell, but also go to a startup, go to a big company, go ask people who work in these companies, ask them what they do. If you find anybody, male or female, whatever, you find somebody working at a company that you're kind of interested in. And then I think this, one of you said, remain curious, be very curious to go out, even if you're in a job at a company that you don't like right now, go and look at a different company and one that's in a different industry. So say you're in optoelectronics, but you're interested in the power industry. Oh, well, go and talk to a company, somebody who's working in that industry. Say you're looking at somebody who works in semiconductors and you never understood anything about that, but maybe you'd be interested. So I think remaining curious, especially if you're thinking about dropping out too. And there are levels to also, is when you have, we didn't touch upon this, but I have kids. Okay. And that's when a lot of women drop out. Okay. They go into something totally different because it's strenuous. It's stressful, but
They're
there are
away a long time from the.
but there are other ways to, because of remote work, because of AI, because of startups, because you might have a lot of more flexibility and starting your own business too, that allows you to have a family at the same time. So remain curious, remain open to new and weirder, different ways of creating your career. It's because I think that can preserve people's ability to do engineering for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think hitting on some of that resiliency that Noel just announced, like keep going. That's number one. Like there is no right or wrong answer for most things. Engineering is an extremely, extremely diverse field, and like you can spend a lot of time doing a lot of things a lot of different ways. Clearly, Christina can attest to this with all of the dissertations she's seen of people trying to solve a very similar problem. But I will also lean on, once again, Blue Origin a little bit, where two of the leadership principles at this company are have backbone, like agree or disagree, but commit to that once you move on. And then also when you're in these experiences and like you're feeling either like disgruntled with yourself or you're feeling at, some level of discomfort, like be able to understand, like to the best of your ability, what's going on, keep going.
Yeah. I would say if you're uncomfortable, you're probably learning, right? If you're comfortable, you're complacent, you're probably not growing as an individual, you're just settling, right? You're not really meeting your full potential necessarily. So I think, just being uncomfortable is okay, right? And feeling like you're in over your head at times, that's also okay. You're learning, right? Don't let it discourage you. Keep going. Do what you got to do. I think, also having a support system, I think is really important. So, those people at your institution that, you can reach out to. If you don't have that at your institution, like Noel said, maybe look somewhere else, right? And maybe it's not going to have some big flashy name, that company, but you're like, this is an environment where I can grow, where I can develop, where I'll have the support I need to really be the best I want to be at this profession, right?
Yeah.
And to meet my full potential. And, maybe you've gone all you can in one field or at your company or institution, whatever it is, and then maybe it's time for a change. And change is also okay, and it can happen at any time in your career. Don't feel like you're ever like locked in and now I'm stuck, right? There's always an opportunity. You can always change. You can always pivot, whatever it is.
That's wonderful. I love what you said about being uncomfortable. That's good. I can't believe the time. This hour went by really fast. I want to thank you all for attending. And to our panelists, thank you for the advice and for sharing your experiences and life is at Tech being a Hokie. We really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen, the queen of communication, which we should all do better.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.